Late night at Coastal Grace Hospital, a young woman was rushed into the emergency bay, blood soaking through her expensive silk blouse. She gripped the nurse's wrist and whispered, "Please, just make it fast. I don't want to feel the pain." No doctor arrived in time. A man in a faded security uniform burst through the door, his voice low and steady. "I'm a medic. Let me help." He pulled off his jacket and draped it over her trembling body. Under the harsh fluorescent light, faded numbers were visible on his forearm. Military ink. He was a hero, but why was he living like a shadow? The hallways of Coastal Grace Hospital smelled like disinfectant and silence. Diego Torres walked them every night, boots scuffing against polished floors that reflected nothing but emptiness. He wore the same Navy security uniform he'd worn for 3 years. The fabric was worn thin at the elbows. His name tag hung crooked. No one ever straightened it. He was 47 years old, but his hands looked older, his tan skin marked with scars that ran along his knuckles. The kind you got from holding people together when they were falling apart. Most nights were quiet. He checked doors, logged rounds, watched drunk drivers get stitched up in the ER. He never asked questions, never offered advice. He just made sure the building stayed standing until morning. At 2 in the morning, he sat in the staff cafeteria with a thermos of black coffee. On the table in front of him was a folded piece of construction paper. He opened it carefully. Inside was a crayon drawing of a brown-skinned man in a blue uniform standing next to a woman with dark hair. Above them, a lopsided sun. Below, in uneven letters, "My husband is my hero." Elena had given it to him that morning before he left for his shift. She was 42 years old, and after all these years, she still believed that. He folded it back up and tucked it into his shirt pocket. The radio on his belt crackled. A voice came through sharp and fast. "Security to emergency entrance now." Diego stood. He didn't run. Running made people panic. He walked quickly, his stride long and even, the way he'd been trained. When he pushed through the double doors, the cold night air hit him first. Then he saw the blood. A silver Mercedes was parked crooked near the ambulance bay. Its front end crumpled. The driver's side door hung open. A woman was being pulled from the back seat by 2 paramedics. Her head lolled to the side. Her blouse was soaked red from the collarbone down. One of the paramedics shouted over his shoulder, "Where's the doctor?" A nurse stood near the entrance, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was tight. "He's stuck in surgery. Another 10 minutes." The paramedic swore under his breath. They lifted the woman onto a gurney and wheeled her through the doors. Diego followed. Inside under the fluorescent lights, he got a better look at her. Mid-30s, blonde hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. Her skin was pale, lips colorless. She was conscious, barely. Her eyes rolled toward the ceiling, unfocused. The nurse leaned over her, trying to keep her still. "Ma'am, can you hear me? We're getting you help. Just hold on." The woman's hand shot out and grabbed the nurse's wrist. Her grip was weak, trembling. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. "Just make it fast. I don't want to feel the pain." The nurse looked up at the paramedic. He shook his head. "We need to stop the bleeding now, or she's not going to make it." Diego stepped forward. His voice was calm, low enough that it didn't startle anyone. "I'm a medic. Let me help." The paramedic turned. His eyes flicked to Diego's uniform, then back to his face. "Your security." Diego didn't argue. He pulled off his jacket and draped it over the woman's chest, then rolled up his sleeves. The faded ink on his tan forearm became visible. Numbers, a unit designation. The paramedic saw it and stepped aside. Diego moved quickly. He pressed his hands to the wound, applying pressure with the heel of his palm. Blood welled up between his fingers, warm and slick against his brown skin. He didn't flinch. "Get me gauze and something to elevate her legs." The nurse handed him a stack of sterile pads. He packed the wound, his movements precise and efficient. The woman's breathing was shallow, her pulse weak under his fingertips. He checked her pupils. One was blown, not good. He tilted her head back slightly, clearing her airway. Then he spoke to her, his voice steady. "You're going to be okay. Stay with me." Her eyes found his. For a moment, they focused. She stared at him like she was trying to remember something. Then the doctor burst through the door. "I've got it from here." Diego stepped back. He wiped his hands on a towel someone handed him and watched as they moved the woman into a trauma bay. The doors swung shut. The hallway fell quiet again. The paramedic clapped him on the shoulder. "Nice work." Diego didn't reply. He picked up his jacket from the floor, shook it out, and put it back on. Then he walked back to his post. Do you think Diego made the right choice stepping in? What would you have done in that moment? By the time his shift ended, the sun was rising. He clocked out, changed into his street clothes, and drove home in a 12-year-old Honda with a cracked windshield. Elena was already awake when he walked through the door. She stood at the kitchen counter in her robe, making coffee. Her dark eyes lit up when she saw him, and she smiled warmly. "Hi, mi amor." He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind, kissing her temple. "Morning, beautiful." She turned in his embrace and studied his face. "Long night?" "Just the usual." She didn't look convinced. After 17 years of marriage, she could read him like a book, but she didn't push. She just poured him a cup of coffee and sat down at the table with him. They talked about small things, the leaky faucet in the bathroom, the garden she was planning for the spring, the lunch she'd have with her sister later that week. He listened to every word, grateful for the normalcy of it all. After breakfast, Elena kissed him goodbye before heading to her shift at the elementary school where she worked as a teaching assistant. Diego went to bed and slept until noon. 3 days later, he was back at the hospital. Same hallways, same rounds. He'd almost forgotten about the woman in the ER. Then he saw her. She was standing near the main entrance talking to a man in a suit. She wore a tailored blazer and heels that clicked against the tile. Her hair was pulled back. Her posture was perfect. She looked nothing like the bleeding woman on the gurney, but it was her. Diego kept walking. He didn't stare, didn't stop. He had no reason to, but she saw him. Her eyes tracked him across the lobby. He felt it. He kept his head down and turned the corner. Later that night, his supervisor called him into the office. The man was in his 50s, balding, perpetually tired. "Torres, you got a visitor?" Diego frowned. "Who?" The supervisor gestured toward the window. Outside in the hallway stood the woman from the ER. She was alone this time. Her arms were crossed. Diego stepped out. She turned to face him. "You're the one who helped me." It wasn't a question. He nodded once. She studied him for a moment. Her expression was unreadable. "I wanted to say thank you." Diego shook his head. "You don't need to." She didn't seem to know what to do with that. She shifted her weight, glancing at the floor before meeting his eyes again. "The doctors told me you saved my life." He didn't respond. She extended her hand. "I'm Victoria Ashford." He looked at her hand but didn't take it. "I know who you are." Her jaw tightened. She lowered her hand. "Then you know I don't like owing people." Diego's voice stayed level. "You don't owe me anything." Victoria stared at him. Something flickered in her eyes. Confusion, maybe, or irritation. "I'd like to do something for you. Compensation, recognition, whatever you want." Diego shook his head again. "I don't need that." Her voice sharpened. "Everyone needs something." He met her gaze. His tone didn't change. "I just need you to live better than you were that night." For the first time, she had nothing to say. Diego turned and walked away. He didn't look back. Victoria stood in the hallway for a long time. Then she left, but she didn't forget. Over the next 2 weeks, Diego heard nothing from her. He worked his shifts, came home to Elena, helped her cook dinner, watched telenovelas with her on the couch, held her close at night. It was a simple life, a quiet one. He didn't need it to be anything else. But late at night, when the hospital was silent and he walked the empty corridors, he sometimes thought about the woman with the sharp eyes and the expensive clothes. He wondered if she remembered what she'd said that night. Please just make it fast. He wondered what kind of life made someone say that, and he wondered if she was living any differently now. He didn't expect to find out, but he would. Victoria Ashford didn't sleep well anymore. She used to pride herself on it. 6 hours sharp. No dreams, no interruptions, just efficient rest that kept her functional through 16-hour days and back-to-back board meetings. But now, every time she closed her eyes, she saw the ceiling of the emergency room, the fluorescent lights, the taste of copper in her mouth, and the face of a Latino man she didn't know. His strong hands steady and sure, telling her she was going to be okay. She hated that she remembered it so clearly. 2 weeks had passed since she'd tried to thank him. 2 weeks since he'd walked away like she hadn't just offered him everything most people spent their lives chasing. Recognition, money, a favor from one of the most powerful women in the state. He'd refused it all. She didn't understand people like that. Victoria sat in her corner office on the 43rd floor, staring at a contract she should have signed an hour ago. The city stretched out below her, a grid of glass and steel. She'd built her empire here. She knew how to win, how to take control, how to make people need her more than she needed them. But Diego Torres hadn't needed anything, and that unsettled her more than the accident itself. Her assistant knocked and entered without waiting for a response. The gala is tonight. Car leaves at 7 Swayuk. Victoria glanced at the clock. It was already 5:30. Fine. The assistant lingered. Also, the hospital called. They're naming you as the keynote speaker. They want you to talk about your recovery. Victoria's jaw tightened. I didn't agree to that. The assistant hesitated. They said it would be good for your image. Show vulnerability, relatability. Victoria looked up sharply. I don't need to show anything. The assistant nodded quickly and left. Victoria leaned back in her chair. She knew what they wanted. A story, a narrative, the CEO who survived, the woman who came back stronger. It was good PR, it always was. But she didn't want to tell that story because the truth was she hadn't come back stronger. She'd come back afraid. At 7:15, Victoria stepped out of a black sedan in front of Coastal Grace Hospital. The building was lit up for the event. Banners draped across the entrance. Inside, the main atrium had been transformed. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, a string quartet playing near the silent auction tables. Donors in tuxedos and evening gowns mingled under chandeliers that cost more than most people's houses. Victoria moved through the crowd with practiced ease. She smiled, shook hands, thanked people for their generosity. She'd done this 100 times before. But tonight, she couldn't focus. Her eyes kept scanning the room. She didn't know why. He wouldn't be here. He was a night security guard. This wasn't his world. Then she saw him. He was standing near the back of the room just outside the main floor. He wore the same navy uniform, his hands clasped behind his back. His tan skin seemed to absorb the soft lighting, making him almost invisible in the shadows. He wasn't watching the guests. He was watching the exits. Victoria's breath caught. She turned back to the conversation she was supposed to be having, but the words coming out of her mouth felt distant, automatic. Her mind was somewhere else. Halfway through dinner, someone collapsed. It happened fast. A woman in her 60s, sitting 3 tables over, clutched her chest and pitched forward. Her husband screamed. People jumped up. Chairs scraping against the floor. Someone shouted for a doctor. Victoria stood, her pulse spiking. Then Diego was there. He moved through the crowd like water, calm and unrushed. He knelt beside the woman and loosened her necklace. He checked her pulse, tilted her head back, started compressions. The room went silent except for the sound of Diego counting under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. His hands moved in a steady rhythm, pressing down on the woman's sternum with controlled force. Someone ran up with a defibrillator. Diego took it without looking up. A attached the pads, and stepped back. Clear. The woman's body jerked. Nothing. Diego checked again. Started compressions again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Victoria couldn't look away. She'd seen him save her life, but she'd been half conscious, barely aware. Now she saw everything. The precision, the focus, the absolute certainty in every movement. He wasn't panicking, he wasn't second-guessing. He was doing what he'd been trained to do, and he was saving a life. The woman gasped, her eyes fluttered open. Diego helped her onto her side, keeping her stable. Paramedics arrived moments later and took over. Diego stood, wiped his hands on his pants, and stepped back into the crowd. No one stopped him. No one asked his name. He just disappeared. Victoria's hands were shaking. She sat down her glass before anyone noticed. She found him 20 minutes later standing outside near the loading dock. He was alone, leaning against the brick wall with his arms crossed. His uniform was wrinkled. There was a smudge of something on his sleeve. He looked up when she approached. His expression didn't change. Victoria stopped a few feet away. She didn't know what to say. Finally, she managed. "You did it again." Diego glanced back toward the building. "She'll be fine." Victoria shook her head. "That's not what I meant." He looked at her, then really looked at her. His eyes were steady. No anger, no expectation, just quiet patience. She took a breath. "I need to know something." He waited. "Why are you here?" Diego frowned slightly. "I work here." Victoria's voice sharpened. "No, why are you doing this? You were a combat medic. You have a bronze star. I looked you up. You saved 23 soldiers in 2 separate incidents. You were decorated, honored, and now you're working night security at a hospital for minimum wage." Diego's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. That was a long time ago. Victoria stepped closer. "So what happened? Why aren't you out there doing what you were trained to do?" Diego didn't answer right away. He looked past her toward the parking lot. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "Because I have a wife, and she needs me more than anyone else does. We made a life together. I'm not throwing that away." Victoria felt something crack open inside her chest. She wanted to say something, apologize maybe, but Diego was already walking away. What do you think drives someone to walk away from glory and choose an ordinary life? Is Diego a hero or a fool? That night, Victoria sat alone in her penthouse. The city glittered below her, endless and indifferent. She poured herself a glass of wine and didn't drink it. She kept thinking about what he'd said. She needs me more than anyone else does. It was such a simple answer, so clear. And it made her feel small because Victoria didn't have anyone who needed her like that. She had employees, investors, a PR team, but no one who would care if she came home late. No one who drew pictures of her in crayon. She'd built everything she had, and it had cost her everything else. The guilt settled in slowly, heavy and cold. She'd tried to erase him. After the accident, she'd made sure his name stayed out of the press. She didn't want people asking questions, didn't want the story to be about a Latino security guard saving a white CEO. It didn't fit the narrative, so she buried it. And now she realized what that meant. She'd taken credit for her own survival. Let people believe she'd fought through it alone. Let them call her strong, resilient, a survivor. But she wasn't any of those things. She was a coward. And Diego Torres knew it. The next morning, Victoria called an emergency meeting with her communications team. They gathered in the conference room, laptops open, coffee in hand. She stood at the head of the table. "I need to make a statement." Her PR director looked up. "About what?" Victoria's voice was firm. "About the accident, about who really saved me." The room went quiet. Her PR director set down his pen. "Victoria, we've already moved past that. The narrative is set. You don't need to—" Victoria cut him off. "I'm not asking for advice. I'm telling you what's happening." He stared at her. "This is a mistake." Victoria met his gaze. "Maybe, but it's mine to make." 2 days later, Victoria stood in front of a wall of cameras. Reporters filled the room, notebooks ready, microphones clustered on the podium in front of her. She took a breath. 3 weeks ago, I was in a car accident. I was brought to Coastal Grace Hospital in critical condition. The doctors were delayed. I didn't think I was going to make it. She looked directly into the nearest camera. But I did because a man named Diego Torres saved my life. The room erupted in questions. Victoria held up a hand. He's a night security guard at the hospital. He's also a decorated combat medic. And when no one else could help me, he stepped in. He didn't ask for recognition. He didn't ask for anything. And I never gave him credit. Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. I let people believe I survived on my own, that I was strong enough to pull through. But the truth is, I would have died that night if it wasn't for him, and I owe him everything. She looked down at her hands. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. The press conference ended. Victoria walked off stage and didn't look back. Diego saw it on the television in the hospital cafeteria. He was sitting with Elena, who had stopped by with lunch during her break. The news was playing on the wall-mounted screen. He wasn't paying attention until he heard his name. He looked up. Victoria's face filled the screen. She was speaking into a microphone, her voice steady and clear. A man named Diego Torres saved my life. Diego sat down his sandwich. Elena was at the table with him. She'd brought homemade tamales and was arranging them on plates. She looked up at the screen, then at him. Her eyes went wide. Diego, is that you? Diego didn't answer. He just stared. Victoria kept talking. She told the whole story. The accident, the emergency room, the way he'd refused her thanks, the way she'd buried his name, and then she apologized. Elena reached across the table and took his hand. Her eyes were shining. Mi amor, you never told me. He swallowed hard. His throat felt tight. I just did my job. Elena shook her head, squeezing his hand tighter. No, you're a hero. Diego's chest ached. He pulled Elena close, wrapping his arms around her. She held him tight, her head against his shoulder. On the screen, Victoria finished her statement and walked away. Diego didn't know what to feel, but for the first time in a long time, he felt seen. The phone started ringing at 6:00 in the morning. Diego ignored the first 3 calls. By the 4th, Elena was awake, sitting up in bed next to him, her dark hair falling over her shoulders. Diego, your phone won't stop. He sat up and checked the screen. 15 missed calls, 23 text messages, all from numbers he didn't recognize. He scrolled through a few of the messages. Is this Diego Torres? We'd love to interview you. Channel 5. News wants to tell your story. We're offering $50,000 for an exclusive sit-down. He sat the phone down and looked at Elena. Go back to sleep. I'll make coffee. She shook her head and got up with him. No, we'll deal with this together. They went to the kitchen and started making breakfast. The phone kept buzzing on the counter. He turned it off. By the time they sat down to eat, Elena had her arms crossed, watching him carefully. What are you going to do? Diego shrugged. Nothing. Keep working. Elena frowned. Diego, the whole city knows who you are now. You can't just ignore this. Watch me. She reached across the table and took his hand again. Her voice was soft. I'm proud of you. You know that, right? He nodded. I know. But you don't have to do this alone. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Diego squeezed her hand. Together. Over the next 3 days, the calls didn't stop. Reporters showed up at the hospital. A woman in a suit waited outside Diego's apartment building with a camera crew. Someone left a business card under his windshield wiper with a note that said, Let's talk, 6 figures. Diego threw it away. He kept his head down, worked his shifts, came home to Elena, helped her cook dinner. But everywhere he went, people were watching, pointing, whispering. At the hospital, his supervisor called him into the office. Torres, you've got a problem. Diego sat down. What kind of problem? The supervisor leaned back in his chair. You're a distraction. People are coming here just to see you. We've had 3 news vans in the parking lot this week. Administration is concerned. Diego's jaw tightened. I'm just doing my job. The supervisor nodded. I know, but they're asking me to put you on leave until this blows over. Diego stared at him. You're suspending me? The supervisor held up a hand. Paid leave just for a week or 2. Let things calm down. Diego stood. I need this job. The supervisor looked uncomfortable. I know, but it's not my call. Diego left without another word. That night, he sat on the couch with Elena curled up next to him. She was reading a book. He wasn't reading anything. He was staring at the wall trying to figure out what came next. He'd built his life around routine, predictability. He knew what every day looked like. He knew how to keep Elena happy and safe. He knew how to stay invisible. But now he wasn't invisible anymore, and he didn't know how to fix that. Elena looked up at him. Diego, what's wrong? He forced a smile. Nothing, mi vida. I'm okay. She didn't look convinced. She set down her book and shifted so she was facing him. Talk to me. He took a breath. I don't know what comes next. Everything I built. It's falling apart. Elena's voice was firm. Nothing is falling apart. Things are changing, yes, but we'll figure it out. We always do. Diego looked at her. At the woman who had stood by him through everything. Through the nightmares after he came home from Bosnia. Through the years when he couldn't find work. Through every hard moment and every small victory. She had never wavered. What would I do without you? Elena smiled. You'll never have to find out. 2 days later, someone knocked on their door. Diego opened it. Victoria Blake stood on the other side. She looked different. No suit, no heels, just jeans and a plain sweater. Her hair was down. She looked tired. Diego didn't say anything. Victoria shifted her weight. Can I come in? He stepped aside. She walked past him into the small living room. Elena was on the couch folding laundry. She looked up and stared. Victoria gave her a small smile. Hi. Elena set down the shirt she was folding and stood. She crossed the room and extended her hand. I'm Elena, Diego's wife. Victoria shook her hand. Victoria Ashford. I'm the woman he saved. Elena nodded slowly, studying her. I know who you are. There was a moment of silence. Then Elena gestured toward the couch. Please sit. Victoria sat down. Diego stayed standing, his arms crossed. Elena returned to the couch but didn't continue folding. She just watched. Victoria looked up at Diego. I'm sorry. Diego's voice was level. For what? Victoria's voice was quiet. For all of it. For putting you in this position. For making your life harder. I thought I was doing the right thing by telling the truth, but I didn't think about what it would cost you. Diego didn't respond right away. Elena reached out and touched his arm gently. He looked at her, then back at Victoria. Finally, he sat down in the chair across from them. Why are you here? Victoria took a breath. Because I want to make it right. Diego shook his head. You can't. What's done is done. Victoria leaned forward. Maybe, but I can try. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. She sat it on the coffee table between them. I'm starting a foundation. The Torres Foundation for Community Health. It's focused on emergency medical training for communities that don't have access to it. I want to build a network of first responders, teach people how to save lives when help isn't coming fast enough. Diego glanced at the folder but didn't touch it. Victoria kept talking. I need someone to design the training programs. Someone who knows what they're doing. Someone who's been in the field. Someone like you. Diego looked up at her. I'm not interested. Victoria's voice sharpened. Why not? Diego gestured toward Elena. Because I have a wife and I don't want to spend my life away from her. We've sacrificed enough. Victoria's expression softened. You wouldn't have to be. This isn't a full-time position. It's consulting. You design the curriculum, train the trainers, then you step back. You'd still have time for her. Elena spoke up, her voice thoughtful. Diego, maybe you should consider it. He turned to look at her, surprised. Elena? She reached over and took his hand. I know you're worried about us, about our life together, but this could be something good, something that honors everything you've done. And I'll be right here beside you every step of the way. Diego stared at her. His throat felt tight. Elena smiled. We're a team, remember? Together. He nodded slowly. Together. Victoria stood. Just think about it, please. She left the folder on the table and walked to the door. She looked back at them one more time. You're right. What's done is done. But that doesn't mean we can't do something good with it. She left. Diego and Elena sat there for a long time, holding hands. Finally, Elena picked up the folder and opened it. Inside were blueprints for a training center, a proposed curriculum, a list of cities that didn't have adequate emergency services, and a handwritten note from Victoria. You taught me what it means to save a life. Let me help you teach others. Elena looked at Diego. What do you think? Diego looked at the papers, then at his wife. At the woman who had always believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. I think maybe it's time. Elena smiled and kissed him softly. Then let's do it, together. 3 weeks later, Diego stood in front of a room full of volunteers. They were firefighters, EMTs, teachers, and civilians who wanted to learn how to help. The training center wasn't finished yet. They were meeting in a rented warehouse with folding chairs and a projector screen. Diego had never taught before. He didn't know how to stand in front of people and explain what he knew. But Victoria had asked him to try, and Elena had told him he should. So he did. He started with the basics: how to check for a pulse, how to clear an airway, how to apply pressure to a wound. He demonstrated on a mannequin. Then he walked through the room correcting grips, answering questions, showing them how to move with confidence. By the end of the session, his voice was hoarse, but the volunteers were smiling, nodding, taking notes. One of them came up to him afterward. Thank you. I've always wanted to know how to do this. Diego nodded. You'll be ready when it matters. Victoria was waiting for him outside. She leaned against her car, arms crossed, watching him. How'd it go? Diego shrugged. Okay, I think. Victoria smiled. They loved you. Diego didn't know what to say to that. Elena pulled up in their Honda. She got out and walked over, slipping her hand into Diego's. She looked at Victoria. Thank you for this opportunity. Victoria nodded. Thank you both. For giving it a chance. They stood there in the parking lot, the sun setting behind the warehouse. For the first time, the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. Elena squeezed Diego's hand. Ready to go home? He smiled down at her. Always. 1 year later, the Torres Center for Community Healing opened its doors. It was a 3-story building on the edge of the city, built with donations from across the state. Inside were training rooms, simulation labs, and a wall covered in photos of people who had completed the program. Over 2,000 volunteers had been trained. 37 lives had been saved because of what they learned. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was packed. Local officials, press, families who'd lost loved ones, and families who'd been saved. Elena stood next to Diego holding his hand. She wore a beautiful blue dress, her dark hair styled elegantly. She kept squeezing his hand, her eyes bright with pride. Victoria stood at the podium. This center exists because one man knew how to act when no one else could. Diego Torres didn't ask for recognition. He didn't ask for anything, but he gave everything when it mattered most. She looked over at him. And now, because of him, thousands of others will be able to do the same. The crowd applauded. Diego shifted uncomfortably. Elena squeezed his hand. Victoria gestured toward the microphone. Diego, would you like to say a few words? He hesitated. Then he walked up to the podium. The crowd went quiet. He looked out at them, faces he didn't know, people who were here because of something he'd done. He cleared his throat. I'm not good with microphones. I'm better with heartbeats. A few people laughed. He glanced at Elena. She was watching him with shining eyes. I didn't do any of this for recognition. I did it because someone needed help. That's all. And if I can teach one person how to do the same, then maybe the next time someone's lying on the ground, scared and bleeding, they won't have to wait for a hero because the person next to them will already know what to do. He stepped back. The applause was louder this time. After the ceremony, Diego stood outside with Elena. Victoria joined them. She looked at the building. We did it. Diego nodded. You did it. Victoria shook her head. No, we did. Elena smiled warmly at Victoria. Would you like to join us for dinner? We're just going to a little place nearby. Victoria looked at them. Something soft crossed her face. I'd like that very much. Diego glanced at Elena. She nodded encouragingly. Okay. They walked to the parking lot together. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. Elena walked between them, her arm linked through Diego's. Victoria walked beside them, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. They got in their cars and drove toward the restaurant. Inside Diego's Honda, Elena rested her hand on his knee. I'm proud of you. Diego looked at her, at the woman who had given him everything that mattered. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Elena smiled. I know. That's why we make a good team. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. The best team. They drove through the city as the sun disappeared below the horizon, heading toward a future they would face together, just like they always had. What does true heroism look like to you? Is it the dramatic moments in the spotlight, or the quiet choices we make every day for the people we love?